Welcome to the Slog Pod, where burning it all down is tempting, but we've got kids.
Today's episode: media, science, government are imperfect. We get it. But does that mean we just throw it all out? In this episode, we're going to explore the mental slog of polarized thinking, mistrust, and the possibility of non-binary solutions in a culture addicted to all good or all evil. So we get it. You don't trust the media. You don't trust science. You don't trust the government. Welcome to the club. But if everything's corrupt, broken, or fake, now what? What do we actually believe in? So as we talk about the slog of mistrust and why we've become addicted to the binary choice between blind faith or full rejection, we've got some examples to help other people who feel that too be okay with the gray. Not everything's black and white.
So why we're all suspicious, and we should be. Let's be real. The skepticism isn't coming out of nowhere. There's been public health contradictions. We've watched media spin. We live through gaslighting from our politicians that seems like a daily event. But the real problem, we don't know how to hold that distrust without going straight to nihilism.
Or paranoia or delusion or just, like me, exhaustion.
Yep.
Yeah.
So we fall into this trap of binary thinking, this mental trap, right? So it seems you've got this cognitive bias where humans crave simple answers under stress. We want to know yes, no, true, false, black, white, those sorts of things. These polarized narratives create emotional safety. We see it as this is good, that is evil. And also black and white thinking sells. It's because that complexity doesn't go viral. And it's much more difficult. That nuance, that complexity, it seems a lot harder.
Let's tackle that media thing since you brought it up. I see a lot of this. I've been guilty of it too sometimes. It's just taking that mental shortcut to say, okay, well, there's a particular media outlet that is obvious. They're biased, they're spinning. Therefore, now I can't trust any media. And that's problematic because we're going straight from something's misleading or biased to everything's propaganda. I just think there's so much more to it. Like you said, it's the complexity part that's so hard. That stuff doesn't go viral. It's difficult and it's uncomfortable. The media thing, I see it far too often. I don't even watch the news. They're all full of crap.
There's a lot of problems with that. I think we're going to get into that a little bit as we look at, it's not one organization or one. Let's break this down into pieces. When we start saying things like that, you've talked about false equivalency before, where we say, well, that side's just as bad as this side. That's not necessarily true. What is the nuance there? I think we need to examine that. Another example is science skepticism. We would talk about early missteps in COVID, it kind of becoming the science is a lie type of thing, which is ridiculous. We forgot that science evolves. It's a process. It's a scientific method. But people wanted during that time these perfect predictions. That's not how science works.
If the scientific community got something wrong early on, that we're just going to completely discount and ignore anything else the experts like the virologists, public health experts were saying. Yeah, I definitely saw that and
it's easy to slide down to one end or the other. So what happens when we throw it all out?
Obviously, when we lose trust in our systems completely and that trust collapses, we become more emotionally isolated. We're more anxious, right? Misinformation, it's too powerful at that point for us to even keep up with. And that's where we get into things like conspiratorial thinking, because that's comforting, because at least I feel like someone has control. I have that perception that someone's in control. So ultimately, our personal agency gets outsourced to the outrage we feel.
Or it becomes apathy. Absolutely. And I feel like that's happening, well, everywhere. I know we felt it. Hell, we're outraged enough that we're sitting here having these discussions regularly to try to figure out what's going on. And apathy, I feel it is, I think I mentioned before, it's tough to even watch the news now. And I know that I have difficulties. And, of course, I'm telling myself I can try to see the bias and that sort of thing. But when it's happening over and over again, that outrage or whatever that is, it makes me want to find apathy. It makes me want to disengage from all of it. And I do, because those feelings are so awful. Yeah. Wow. It just keeps going. And I think the last example we've got is kind of that government mistrust. And maybe we're talking about that more than anything today, and that it leads to opting out of such things as voting or engagement or basic civic life. But on the other hand, the opposite reaction is privatizing everything or engaging with more fringe groups. We're getting pulled to the extremes and becoming more and more polarized, one way or the other. And yeah, I don't know.
We get it. We deal with it too.
Mhm.
Totally get it. But I think the question we're asking today is, if we just throw it all out or burn it all down and replace it with nothing, with apathy, with nihilism, then that's not rebellion. That's not revolution. That's surrender.
It's worse than surrender. It's anarchy, really.
So it really could go that way.
As a therapist, I've been skeptical of everything, including the healthcare systems and the systems within where I worked, but I still used it, promoted it to others, because rejecting it all didn't help anybody. It didn't help me. It didn't help my clients. So I think healthcare in America is in a very strange place. We're not getting the outcomes we need or have paid for. That's an episode on its own. But yeah, I don't want to reject it all offhand. I want to fix these things, and I don't know that we are. You got any other thoughts about things like that?
I think of it in the context, especially relevant to us and a lot of our friends, is the veteran community. I've seen a shift within the veteran community, in large part losing trust in the government. When we got back from the Iraq War, I was very mistrustful of the government for a lot of reasons. In today's time, we're seeing a lot of changes at the VA. Veterans benefits are being used as a negotiating chip politically. It's easy to see how veterans could sour on their government.
I don't know that I want to dissuade people from souring on the government and all of this. And I think that what you and I have been through when it comes to veteran services, because we've both been involved in that, and we're both veterans and have been through both the receiving and the giving end of that, is trying to find that moderation.
Yeah.
As we talk about the VA, I think about how many conversations I had. 1 minute I'd hear the VA is the worst thing ever. And then the next minute I would hear the VA is great. This is the only healthcare system that I can trust. And there's good and bad and different examples within that are tough to grasp. We all have to understand that total trust or total distrust doesn't seem healthy. I'm not about revolution, but I'm also not about sticking with the status quo. How's that?
Yeah. Let's have an honest conversation about what's going on. And it's going to be a weighty, heavy, complicated conversation. It's not going to be just as simple as saying, well, the VA is the worst or the VA is the best. The answer, like anything in life, is somewhere in the middle.
Our solutions will likely be somewhere in the middle. What you and I are getting at oftentimes is that tension, that tension of, I don't know how to feel about it. It's so easy to slide down one way or the other, and it's hard to find that balance point. And that balance point can even be changing.
Yeah.
So it's knowing the system is flawed, but not abandoning the people inside it or many of the pieces of that system.
And what those systems still do for a society that is beneficial.
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, those solutions seem that it's what's between blind faith and total rejection. And I hope we can find that. As we talk to our listeners and anyone else who wants to be involved in this conversation, I guess my first ask is, can this be partially true? As we talk about media, as we talk about the government, as we talk about science, can these things be partially true? Can we be okay with that?
Mm.
That ambiguity is a son of a bitch, huh?
And can more than one thing be true?
Absolutely.
Time.
You're right. It's not just true or false. We have many truths or many falsities in there. It's interesting, right?
It is. It is.
Can we ask to engage with our systems locally?
What do you mean by that?
I mean, when I talk to people in therapy, an underlying distortion or cognition that can be harmful to someone is trust. Mm-hmm. So they can have an underlying idea of, I can't trust this or that. It seems to me that systems locally, those nearest to us, we automatically have more control.
Right.
To those things that are nearest to us. And that's where accountability seems much more possible.
Gotcha. So, and that's also holding a couple different thoughts in your head too, that while there is the government, multiple levels
of the government,
and some levels of government are more impactful on our everyday lives than others. And I don't think you have to be a genius to figure out which one is which that I'm talking about. So yeah, at the local level, I can definitely see how engaging with that system more See, in that way, you're not just saying all government is bad.
Sure.
You're saying, hey, there's some problems at every level of government. Where can I make the most impact? Where am I likeliest to see action, accountability, et cetera?
Yes.
So it probably is at the local level.
It takes me back to, as we talked about working for the VA or being in those veteran systems. I oftentimes heard from people who had been in other VA systems, and then they came to this system and said, it's great, and that it can be different from place to place, which makes sense too. So rather than throwing out all of them and saying this is entirely bad, maybe different places need to be fixed. Different teams, different divisions, different locations, whatever that is, and we control.
Well, I think that what that does is it sets up the conversation about expectations and what we expect our systems to do. And I think it's tempting to expect that your government in this case is going to be perfect. Of course, ideally it would be, but we know that's not true. That's not even possible. It's the process, not perfection. I coach my daughter's softball team. I tell the girls on the team that all the time. It's not about being perfect. It's about progressing. It's about the process of getting better, learning through failure, developing resiliency in the face of disappointment. If we expect our systems to be perfect, we're always going to be disappointed. I think what we should expect is that our systems evolve, adapt, change.
I like that.
And that's going back to the local thing. That's where we can have the most impact.
Seeking that process over perfection. It reminds me too of our sports analogies. I think of the analogy that got, who was it? I want to say the Milwaukee Bucks center, Giannis.
Oh, yeah.
Remember when he was asked when he didn't win? This was probably 2 years ago, 3 years ago. And he was like, you know, how horrible that was. And they asked him, basically implying how terrible that was. And he's like, well, no. He implied in his response something about, this is the process. I am getting better. Our team is bettering. All of this is better. I love that response.
It's a great outlook. He probably overheard me coaching the girls in little softball. And he was like, that's brilliant.
I'm sure that's what it was.
I think, bringing it back to the topic, I think what we're saying here is we can critique the systems we're in, but still use them. They're there for a reason.
Yeah.
We can distrust leadership, but we can still value what the system could be or what good leadership could be. I guess I'm just not ready to slide fully into that nihilistic, burn it all down thing.
Same goes for the media, right? We can say the media is flawed and still engage in it, still read. We can still look at different segments of whatever we're seeing and decide whether this is legitimate or how legitimate it is, or how much it is supported by evidence or opinion. You can still challenge science and still believe in data. We need that space in the middle. We need to be able to find that ambiguity and find comfort in that not knowing. At least I hope.
But it's still a struggle.
Yeah.
For us, just as much as anyone.
And I think where we're at right now, or at least where I'm at, it's learning to be maybe skeptical without being cynical. That's tough for me because I do watch the news and I hear the false points being made. And I think I'm pretty good at picking a lot of those out. And that's the slog I'm in every day. I don't want to burn it all down, but I also am not going to sit on the sidelines and sit on my hands either. So I've got to find that middle ground and decide, trust this person here or there and not fall into false equivalencies. I can trust this politician or I can't trust this one. It changes. And it's not because of the letter behind their name. It's because of what's coming out of their mouth, the actions they take, and go with each individual thing and then make those decisions.
Yeah.
But that's hard to do. It's hard to find comfort in that ambiguity.
For me, it's about trusting the small things again, like individual voices, ideas, people, the small stuff. When everything around it, all the big stuff feels so broken and flawed. That's why I really keyed in on that local thing you talked about, because that's been hard for me. It's easy to paint with a broad brush when you're feeling that way and everything's so dysfunctional. No, not everything's dysfunctional. For me to automatically assume that someone, one voice, one idea is also dysfunctional just because everything else is, I'm leaving something on the table as far as what could possibly be something we can use to work toward reform, betterment, and improvement. So just trusting the small stuff again. That's what I slog through.
It's hard. And I feel like our whole nation is leaning towards breaking everything up. let's just toss it all in the trash. And wow, that's that knee-jerk reaction. It's being driven by the social media, by rotten reporting, by made-up data. It's being driven by people not being able to filter accurately. I'm as weary of that knee-jerk reaction as I am anything, because I watch people slide further and further on those polarized options. Do you think we're doing that? You and I. Do you think that we're polarizing one way or another?
I think we're susceptible to it just as anyone, but I think something that we've been working really hard on is to have that moderated. And sometimes we need to call each other out and point out, hey, you're kind of taking that binary polar position. And it's been good for me to take a step back and say, yeah, I am doing it.
It's hard to say that, though. It's really tough.
But how else are we going to fix anything? We're not going to fix it by burning it all down and starting over. I don't think that's realistic.
There's a lot of people who think that. And maybe that's what we're trying to reach to say exactly that. Quit thinking that way, or examine your own thoughts. And do you see the polarized thinking that you're in?
Well, what are some things people can do to start practicing that as they navigate this?
That's a great question. As we asked people to engage in the slog, we gave scientific, government, media type of examples. I think it's to take those things individually. So as we look at the media, examine it, see what's being reported, and start identifying the pieces that are false, that are not true, are leading to polarized thought. It's the same thing as we've said about other things, in that you have to want to seek out the contradictory evidence. So in this case, you're going to have to seek out how this news channel you are watching might not be accurate, and not fully inaccurate, but here and there.
Like being able to spot
Those moments that are accurate and ones that are not, ones that are propaganda and ones that are fact.
Mm-hmm.
So I would challenge people in that. Same as the government, as we look at our systems, it's not throwing it all out and completely destroying what's worked, I would argue, incredibly well for 250 years. But in fixing the little things that need to be fixed, let's turn the knobs a little bit. As we're watching Doge absolutely rumble through as a herd of elephants in a china shop, let's work on those knobs a little bit. So my call to action is to ask people, is there ways we can do this without absolutely throwing everything out? There's assumptions being made within that too, leading to this polarized response, which is no, it all needs to go, or we need to get rid of. And that's the government example. What are we missing? The science example. Same thing. We got to look, it's a process, and understand. So another call to action is to look at that science and understand. If you read a peer-reviewed paper, this is a process. They've taken a little piece of information that they've researched and tried to support that, or the opposite. In every paper, you're trying to identify what is actual truth. And that might be a gray area in most cases. So I'm challenging people to find the gray.
Yeah. Be okay with the gray. And that is hard.
What am I missing here? What are we missing?
I'm sure we're missing a lot. I'm sure of it. But I want to get back to, you were talking about the media and how we ask ourselves a lot of times, how do we even know what's true anymore? If we have the thought in our mind that everything's bad, that media is all biased and everyone's got an angle and they're all trying to spew propaganda, if that's our position, how would we find that kernel of truth somewhere? One of the things I tried for myself that seems to have worked pretty well, at least for me, is I will look at, so take any hot button issue or news story, I will look at that story from several different angles, meaning I'm going to look at CNN, MSNBC, Breitbart, Fox. I'm going to try to give myself a pretty good diverse menu to look at. And what I'm trying to identify there is what's the same in all of them. What are the things that are common throughout all of them? Because yes, all of those outlets I just mentioned probably do have a bent or a bias that they're promoting. So how do I see through that? How do I sift through it? You have to put things side by side sometimes, I think. And that, again, it takes work. You're going to have to read more than one article before you develop your set in stone opinion. But when I'm looking for facts, facts tend to be a common denominator regardless of spin. And if I'm looking at something and there's nothing in common with anything else, then I really have to question the veracity. And that's probably just a pure opinion piece. But that's an exercise people could try. See it from every angle, look for what's common, and assume that's as close to the truth as you're going to get. And then you can maybe start to push some of that other more sensationalized stuff off to the side and clear your mind a little bit. I think it helps with that tension.
You hone your talent in doing that. And it's really about critical thought. We're at a crossroads of people who don't want critical thought and those who do. Critical thought should not be a threat to anyone.
Wouldn't we argue it's one of our superpowers as humans?
I feel like a lot of people think it's a threat. This is another call to action. Use your critical thinking skills. You have them, and those have to be developed, and they always have to be honed. Always. As you and I do, and that's why we're doing this, to discuss the slog, which is really critical thought. We're pushing it. Why not?
Mm-hmm.
I know it's not easy.
It's not easy. So trust something, but question it.
Yeah.
Mistrust something, but don't just discount everything because of that.
Yeah.
We've got to let nuance have its place.
Absolutely. Yeah. Think about something you used to trust and had to reevaluate and be open to change and other things. We'd love to hear about it too. Throw it out there. admin@theslogco.com. We'd love to hear some stories. Yeah. You got anything else for today?
Please don't burn my kid. That's all I'm asking.
I hear you, man.
I love her too much. And we love all of you. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone. Have a good one. Cheers.